Subscribe to this podcast to get exclusive access to the after show Shooting the Breeze. Hello and welcome to Cool Explorations. Today we are going to be speaking with children's author Cara Adams. She's going to discuss her messages that she gives through her books that help them understand Christ a little bit more and a little bit more about what God is and how important that is to be teaching our young children these things at that age so they can get a firm grasp and firm foundation started at a young age. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cool Explorations podcast. Today we have on children's author Cara Adams, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about her writing. But first, why don't you get started by just telling us a little about yourself and a little bit about what you currently do.
Okay, thank you for having me, Tony. Hi, everyone. My name is Cara Adams. I almost said my maiden name, Cara Matthew, but Cara Adams, and I live in the Space Coast of Florida. I guess I should say on the Space Coast of Florida. And it's very hot, full swing summer here, but I love where I live. It's a little piece of paradise, and I'm just very committed to my community here. And I'm also very passionate about my personal growth in my faith, my Christian walk, as well as that of children. I have been an educator for a long time, and I recently just went through a battle with stage 4 cancer and had to go through, the treatment and everything that goes along with that. My hair is growing back right now, Tony. But what's birthed out of that has just been amazing. So I'm excited to share that story.
Yeah, God definitely uses our troubling times to bring about that growth in us and encourage us. I've learned that myself so much with my own health battles, as well as my son's health battles. Why don't you start out by just telling us your testimony as well and what God is currently doing in your life?
Sure. Okay. Well, like many others, I feel like our culture is just deeply self-centered and instead of God-centered. And I don't want to blame culture all the time. I mean, we have responsibility too, and parents have responsibility too, but there is the culture. That's just a loud and clear. We have some culture issues. And I don't think it will get much better. In Luke 18:8, Jesus says there's not going to be much faith on the earth when he's coming back. It doesn't sound like he's going to come back and step into this amazing place. There's just going to be some of us left here. And so that's kind of discouraging, but it also just reminds us that we're just not going to be able to change culture altogether, that we've just got to do what we can for ourselves and for our family. And that's why I'm also just very passionate about children and their faith. So I really didn't grow up with a biblical worldview, but I want this for my daughter, and I've come to get that biblical worldview for myself, and I want that for her as well. My own faith story, it just was a struggle of a lack of guidance, and it's just led me to this moment where I just feel that God has fervently called me into action, into engaging culture and helping children to be able to engage culture, not to just so much withdraw and quit and that kind of thing, but to be able to engage culture because they will have the tools that they need in that with a biblical worldview. Maybe even a life compelling enough to promote change in our culture. Like that would just be so awesome. My life, was pretty just unremarkable. I wasn't, I didn't have any like major trauma or abuse or anything growing up like that. I also didn't have celebrities for parents or anything. It was just a typical life, typical family. We were military, kind of low income level, and we moved around a lot. And that affected me a lot, that we moved around. And I didn't know the Lord growing up. We were semi-Catholic. I'm not trying to offend Catholic. I have a lot of Catholic family that are just amazingly spirit-filled, but we weren't. And my experience wasn't a faith-filled Catholic experience growing up. I don't know if you went through this, or I don't really know your history as far as that goes. But for me, in the Catholic Church, you had to go through a process, a ceremony called reconciliation, and then you get your first Holy Communion. So they force you into a room to confess your sins to a priest, and then you're ready to receive communion. And this just felt so fake to me. I wished I would have had a relationship with the Lord, and that we had this dynamic of, okay, I can come clean to you, and now I'm part of the body of Christ. But I mean, that it just was forced and it was fake. And then a few years later, we go through confirmation, which is where you're supposed to receive the Holy Spirit. And again, they push you in the head and they tell you now you have the Holy Spirit. And I didn't feel that. And so it was at this point where, like, okay, I'm considered an adult sort of in the church, and I didn't have to go anymore. And my parents weren't going to make me go because they didn't feel, their parents made them go, so they made me go. And that was just the cycle of it. And that's the end of my faith background as a child. So here I am in middle school at this point. And I have no faith, and I don't know anyone who has faith. I don't know anyone who's growing up with the Lord. There's no activity for me, no Sunday school, no youth group, no camps in the summertime, like Vacation Bible School or anything like that.
That's where my son is right now.
Yeah, and my daughter loves it. Yeah, and I look at it and what the older kids do. I mean, amazing stuff that they have going on. But so by this time, I had a lot of issues, especially the need to belong, between moving around so much and just not having the Lord or any kind of biblical worldview. Like, I just needed to belong so bad in middle school. And I teach people to be teachers online. And one of the theories that we have to teach is Eric Erickson and his 8 stages of development. And right at this time, where you're like 13 to 18, this is when you have to find your identity, or you have role confusion. So you either make your identity or you are confused about your role in your teenage years. So I was definitely that person, like, trying to find my identity. I didn't know who I was. I tried to belong to this group, and I tried to belong to that group, and I tried to be friends with this person. And I got a lot of heartbreaks and just a lot of friction with other people. And I was just a miserable kid. And I remember deciding very young back then that my parents didn't love me. I mean, even though they didn't do anything to hurt me, that they didn't love me. God wasn't real. And I can just do whatever I want. And that can include hurting people. And because I just need to do what I need to do to get by. Then I spent my teen years also pretty miserable and making other people pretty miserable, because I'm just desperately trying to fill this void more than anything. And I remember just being obsessed with the big relationship, just wanting to have that great big friendship or that boyfriend, and that group that I would belong to. And I always wanted that. And I would try to make it work, and it wouldn't work out. And I would try on something else or try on somebody else, and it just wouldn't work out. And I just time and time again, I was reinventing who I was, just kind of desperate to fill this void and belong and figure out who I was. In the meantime, I watched a lot of movies and listened to a lot of music. And here's where I feel like culture filled this void for me. You know, I don't know if you've experienced that kind of thing, but I definitely, when I started dating in high school, and I would, sleep with my boyfriend. And this became like the problem. This became the beginning of all my problems later as well. Again, I just didn't have the biblical worldview about marriage and family that I'm trying to pass on to my daughter and children. I just kept trying to gain love. I just kept trying to find that love and fill that void and belong to someone. And it was just always a heartbreak, and it was always pain, and it just never worked out. And I would just go from relationship to relationship. Fortunately, school was pretty easy for me, and I made it to college, but I was still just a wayward mess. And I ended up living with my boyfriend in college and getting married, like in college. So that was a huge disaster that blew up in my face. But everyone around me was doing that. It's what I saw in the movies. It's what I listened to in the music, guys and girls. We just dated. we hooked up and
Yeah.
lived together, did whatever. That was just how it was all around me. And it's what I thought was going to be normal. And it was what I thought was how it was going to work. And I thought, I can do this. This is exactly what dating and love is. And I have to get that marriage. I have to get that relationship.
And it's so meaningless. Like it just means nothing. And that is the
Yeah.
problem with movies and music these days, and has been for decades here, where it just makes it seem like it's so meaningless. You just move in and there's nothing, there's no ties. You can just leave whenever.
Yeah, meaningless. So all that blew up at that time. And I have a younger sister who had all my problems, but even worse. And so my family was just a mess. She came to the Lord as a teenager. Then she led my parents to the Lord, and then they led me to the Lord. And all this was how, like, I was going through divorce. I was starting my career. It was just such an emotional roller coaster. Mm-hmm. But, that is when the Lord has stepped in, and it's just never been the same. I'm sure you know what it's like, to be saved, to have that wonderful, wonderful, like, finally, salvation in Jesus. And so things got better, but it was really hard for me to leave my old worldview. So I had just years of trying and trying to get better and making those same mistakes and not letting the Lord be Lord over this, letting him be over here, but not letting him in here. I still got this. I was still making huge dating mistakes, huge. And I know now in hindsight, that I really idolized relationships, and I made love and marriage and relationship this huge idol. And all I wanted to do is make that work. And I wanted it so bad, but I never had the intimacy with the Lord. I never had that relationship with him. So how could I make it work with people here? We have to have that vertical relationship in order for our horizontal relationships to succeed. So that was a huge turning point when I started to really learn intimacy with the Lord. I don't know how people stay married without the Lord. I look at these seemingly successful couples that are unbelievers, and I'm like, well, that just affirms the doctrine of election to me, because I don't know how they're doing it. They have something else.
Well, and our divorce rates are skyrocketing, and sadly among Christian people as well, they're skyrocketing.
So my career had begun it was like 20 something years ago. And when at the same time that I found Jesus, and I knew, okay, I've got to be a different person now. I need to nurture these children, and I need to put into these children, and I can feel God calling me to do stuff with these children. And I've always taught the neediest children, kids with special needs, kids in poverty. So he was just showing me, this is your purpose, and this is where we're going, and this is what I've called you to do. It just took years of him pruning me in different relationships, but it really got a hold of me the most when I became a mother. I mean, parenthood really brought me to my knees in a way that, like, okay, I really surrender now. Like, this is the ultimate blessing and the ultimate surrender. I was so dedicated to my daughter. I still am, obviously. I'm just dedicated to my daughter, and I'm just fervently in prayer for her relationships and for her marriage and her future husband. And I don't want her to make these mistakes that I made. We want to spare our children the retribution of their sins. And culture is sneaking in, and it's difficult to try to protect them from everything. I still love music and videos, and you have to try to censor everything, but it creeps in. Let me give you an example. My values obviously don't support the LGBT movement and that whole agenda. I love the people, and I'm not trying to just hate on them, but she's just a child, and she plays this little game where she adopts pets and has to take care of them. And that's the object of the game. And then she can buy pet beds and brushes and things for them.
Yeah.
So there was a Pride update, and all of these rainbow items are available, and they say Pride on them and things like that. And this is a child's game. You know, she has no idea what that means. And it just makes me want to take the rainbow back somehow. I wrote to the developers just a very concerned email, just expressing myself and trying to be lovingly about it. But it just, here's an example of how it just creeps all the way down to our children. And she's going to grow up with this all around her all the time until but her generation is going to grow up with things like this around them, and it's just acceptable, just like I did.
Yeah, we've had that talk with our children because of that exact thing. Like, you know,
how did you?
We approached it with, we don't agree with what the movement says. We don't agree with being homosexual or bisexual, but at the same time, we need to love them. And we just kind of took it from that point. And I'm like, the Bible's very clear on its position on this. People say, well, Jesus was accepting of homosexuals and everything. I'm like, nowhere in the Bible to say Jesus was accepting of homosexuals.
Right.
God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of their sexual immorality and how deep that ran. He destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And it clearly mentions homosexuality, bestiality, and incest. Like, it clearly mentions those exact things, which makes it very clear how the Lord feels about it. That is not saying we shouldn't love them, because you can't reach them if you hate them or come to a position of being hateful. And so when we explained it to our children, we took it from that kind of point where it's like, you can't judge them for the way that they live. You don't accept the way that they live as being a godly way of living, but we can't judge them or treat them any differently than we would treat anybody else, because as Christians we're called to love. And judging is reserved for the Lord. And we always say that with our children about judging anybody whenever that kind of comes in. And it's hard even for us sometimes not to judge people, but it's like, that's not our job. That's God's job. And we can't step into that role. So we just, that's kind of how we approached it with our children. And we kind of explained a little bit about, you know, what goes on, more so with my 10-year-old. My daughter is 7, so she's a little young to really understand most of that stuff. But my son, you know, when we had the puberty talk, which he hated, that kind of played right into that discussion, because they need to hear that kind of stuff too and understand it, and understand how Jesus feels about it.
Yeah, it was just unfortunate because I have to tell her it's not a good idea for us to buy this Rainbow Pride dog bed. But we're going to get it. We're going to go look at God's rainbow outside, because we do get a lot of rainbows outside, and we're just going to appreciate God's rainbow.
Yeah, and they just love rainbows. Kids just love rainbows.
Yeah, like, they love it. Who doesn't?
Unicorns and that kind of stuff. Like, that's, my daughter just loves that.
They just love it's exactly it. So, but I mean, like I'm trying to say, my point, you know, even before the whole gender agenda and the gay marriage legalization and things like that, we just have this vast sexual sin problem that's just, you know, started, and it's growing and it's growing. And this is just where we are now. It's just a new chapter of the same sin, sexual sins, you know.
And it's like abortion too, is ties in with that. It comes in with the same thing. Sex is meaningless, so the life that is a result is meaningless. And so you can just kill that child, and the child means nothing to you.
It's so sad, Tony. I know women that have had multiple abortions to their name. I mean, and I know multiple women because they just use it as birth control.
Yeah.
You know, even though we have so much birth control available, let's just do this every time.
You don't want to take responsibility for your actions.
Exactly.
And I understand rape is different. Like, it is different, but at the same time, you can't take the anger you have at being raped out on this innocent child. If you don't want to raise the child, put the child up for adoption. but killing that child is not fair because you're making them pay for the sins of their father.
I agree. And who's to say you can't trust the Lord to raise this child of some awesome purpose that he would have anyway?
Yeah.
Just because it was the result of rape doesn't mean you can't trust the Lord to make this child amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
and I was molested twice as a child, so
I'm so sorry.
If people say I can't understand what that's like, yes, I'm a man, so I didn't get pregnant out of all of that, but at the same time, I understand the anger, the frustration,
Right.
and all that comes with that, and what the turmoil that results in your life afterwards. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, as a Christian, looking back now, I can learn to forgive and move on. And if you kill a child, that is not going to heal anything. It's not going to make you feel better. In the end, a lot of women who've had abortions end up feeling a lot of guilt because of it.
Absolutely.
And do you really want that extra guilt added on after the pain of being raped?
Right.
So it's a tough subject, and I understand both sides of it, but at the same time, that child's life is precious, and I love that about what you do, about speaking to children and preaching to children. I love that because it Jesus says, like, about the least of these will enter heaven. Like, it's just, he's very clear on his love for children and how important children are to us.
Absolutely. So we have this huge sin problem that's just increasing, and it's breaking down families and family values, which it's just one of God's big structures for us. It's his plan for marriage and family. I read once that in ancient Hebrews, when a marriage was consummated, everybody was there, not like in a perverted way, but everybody was there. And when the hymen broke, they would have a cloth or something, and then the husband would bring it out to the priests and the elders that were there, even the children, and show them, because this is a blood covenant. God has joined the man and the woman. They are one blood. This is a blood covenant, and this is what's in place for you. And the children grew up knowing this, that their parents made this covenant for them, and they created them intentionally, and this was God's plan for them. And I mean, I just think that's amazing. I think, what if we had that kind of ceremony in our day? Would divorce go down? When you see something like that? I don't know.
Well, and it was a big deal if a woman wasn't a virgin at the time of marriage. It was a big deal, and she could be stoned for that. And so,
because she would have a blood covenant with somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a virgin, she would already be covenanted with somebody else, unfortunately.
Yeah. So marriage has always been, it's been a big deal, and we take it far too lightly in our society. We think if we have disagreements, it's not worth working out. Well, there's counseling, there's different ways of going about trying to reconnect, and there's all kinds of marriage seminars too that churches hold, or there's people who go around and do them. So there's lots of tools out there to try to heal a relationship. No relationship's ever going to be perfect, and I think that's the misconception society has, is they think marriage to be perfect, like there shouldn't be disagreements, that we should all just get along and everything. It's like, it doesn't work that way. We're two different people joining as one, and you're going to have disagreements, but how you work out those disagreements, that's the important part, and that's where God comes in to help you work through that.
It's a lifetime commitment to an imperfect person, but it's a threesome with the Lord.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your battle with cancer, because I would like to hear a little about that before we get into your book.
Sure. Well, like a lot of people who had cancer, I went through a couple of years of like, what is wrong with me? And go to the doctors, like, fix me. What's this? And I went through this test and that test. And So when I finally got the diagnosis, I was kind of like, yes, we figured it out. And I can say that I praised the Lord in the storm for that one. I can say that I was just, thank you for my cancer. Just help me to have whatever I need to endure this. I am going to get through this trial with you. And on the other side, I know you're going to use my pain and whatever I've gone through to serve you and glorify you. And so my battle of cancer, I have to tell you that I went through treatment for 6 months, and so many people poured into me that it was mind blowing for me. Like, I was just literally floored with the love and support of just so many strangers reaching out to me, people I'd never met, people just donating, people starting like meal deliveries. I'm sure you have that in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. People just poured into me with so much love, so much support, so many prayers, so many physical things. Like, it was really one of the most joyful times of my life, other than the being sick part of it. I was almost sad for it to end. But when it did end, I knew that things were going to be different. And that's when the Lord inspired me to start my mother-daughter Bible study and my women's Bible study, and do more things online through social media. Also wrote my book and published my book during that time. And probably one of the biggest things to come out of my treatment was that this pastor in Pakistan reached out, prayed for me for months, just talked to me all the time. I don't know how he found me. I asked him several times, how did you find me? And he said, the Lord sent me to you. The Lord brought us together. He would always say that. I really don't know how he got into my system, but he did. And his name is Pastor Raza, and he's just been a huge influence on my life, because the church in Pakistan is on fire. It is so, this is one of your largest Muslim countries in the world. And the Christian church is just growing and growing and growing and growing. And the people there, they are similarly oppressed as they were in Jesus's time. The religion is just oppressive. Like, I've personally been, they've asked me to teach, taught at different worship meetings for different ministries over there, just like this, via Zoom and stuff. And all of a sudden, the call to prayer, the Muslim call to prayer, will interrupt us for a minute, and we have to just. And they're like, keep going, keep going. They don't want to be stopped by it, because it's meant to be abrasive and make you stop what you're doing and force you into a worship, position. So that's been,
and it's the whole city. It's everything. Yeah, I hear it everywhere.
Yeah. So that's just been really interesting that God has told me, you're going to help these children in Pakistan. You're going to help these people in Pakistan. And this church over there, that's just, and I mean the church, not just one church. I mean the church. There's lots of different ministries that have come out of it, because this person and then this person and this person. And so I've helped them start lots of Bible schools. I've helped them like plant water pumps, feed people, medical, anything I can do to help, because our Western dollars just go so far over there. So how much more we can do.
Yeah, your dollar more than our Canadian dollar.
I mean, maybe tiny bit, but still. So that my battle with cancer was, like I said, one of the most joyful experiences of my life.
Yeah.
All of that came out of it.
And I understand that with my own health issues, where I just 4 or 5 months ago, before I start, however long I've been doing these testimonies for, I was walking with a cane. I only spoke with half my face, and through the hope and encouragement of all of these testimonies, God has brought about so much healing in my body. I still have to watch when I talk to make sure I'm not slurring. My wife picks it up. Most people don't, but my wife does. And I still stumble every once in a while when I walk, but for the most part, God has just really blessed it. And he used that time to help me do this and to grow closer to him and understand God more, and and grow that relationship. And I have to say, if I didn't have this time where I was on disability because of my health, I probably wouldn't be here today doing this. And I wouldn't have that relationship with Jesus Christ that I have now, that closeness. And so it is those times of trial and oftentimes sickness that really just brings us to a point of growth, and where we could truly understand God and grow close to him. And not everybody has that opportunity to do that. And I have to say, Kathy Flett, first person to interview, changed my mind on viewing these things as hurdles and changing it to blessings.
Yeah.
Because I have been blessed with being able to do this. As much as I hated the health problems, it was still a blessing that I get to do this, and I get to spread God's word, because it is just amazing. It almost brings me to tears.
Yeah. Praise
Just
God.
just amazing how God works. I love him dearly, and I know he loves me, and he's been there for me through everything.
Did you get hurt, or were you sick, or?
I get what's called stress seizures, which is because of pain that I have. I had 2 heart procedures when I was 17 and 18. And there's the scar tissue is on cartilage.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not as many nerve endings and stuff in the cartilage, and the blood doesn't flow to it. So pain medications don't hit the cartilage like they would if it was a muscle thing.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So I go through a lot of pain. I cover it well, but the pain ends up triggering stress seizures in my brain. And I was having like 20 seizures a day. I had been 3 months seizure free until this past week when we took a trip, and then that trip ended up triggering seizures. So I've been having seizures again, but I had been 3 months seizure free, and I have to keep reminding myself it's possible. God can get me through there. I keep doing what he wants me to do. He's gonna drive things and help me through everything. He carries us.
Yes.
And so I love that the old thing. I'm gonna date myself here, but footprints in the sand. Just
right.
I love that, because it is so true. In our times when we're struggling, Jesus is the one carrying us.
He is.
So I just have to keep reminding myself of that. And it's something that we talk about with our children, how even with my son's health struggles right now, which I won't get into right at the second, but that Jesus and God carries you through. And you wrote a book, which I really liked, the title, If God Was a Kid in Your Class. You signed it for my daughter, which I appreciate very, very much. She loved that. The book is going to be going on her bookshelf. But how did that book come about? And you've been working on other books. So can you tell us a little bit about these books and this one in particular?
Sure. I think I always wanted to be a writer at some point, and especially a children's author. And when I was in treatment, I had a lot of time to spend with the Lord. And really, the book is to tell about the nature of God the Father, the Creator God. And the children had so many questions all throughout my career. They would always ask a lot of questions, like, is God funny? does he eat? Things like that. Just
he has a sense
questions.
of humor. Yeah,
absolutely. And
look at all the nature creatures out there, and you just see. We always talk about that with my son. God has such a sense of humor just by looking at nature, and we can see so much through nature.
I mean, my daughter loves animals, and we look at animals all the time. Just yesterday, like the tortoise and the giraffe. I mean, these are just so silly when you about it.
The goblin shark, and the lantern, like, just crazy.
He has a sense of humor for sure, but he's also the best. I mean, he can do anything you can do, but better. He invented it. So, I would just always reply with these kinds of answers. And so I wanted to make this book to glorify. This was just going to be my first book. It was going to be for him. It was inspired by all the children that I've taught over the years. And it was for them, and it was for my daughter. And I love going around to different churches and schools, and I read the book and I tell my story. So if there's anybody in the Space Coast area that wants to do that, I'd love for them to reach out to me, but I can also do anything virtual as well. But yeah, then I just enjoyed the whole book process and having that to say, look, this is what I've done for the Lord. That I wrote the next one, so the next one should be coming out pretty soon too as well, and that one is called "If Jesus Was a Player in Your Game."
I love the titles. Like they're so creative and wonderful, and
Thanks.
and bring out the different aspects of God. Definitely.
Children, and I'm just really passionate, about children and having them have a biblical worldview and being equipped to engage with culture.
That is so important these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you are very involved, like you've been talking about, with the different ministries with children.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about where you started doing a lot of ministry for children?
Well, ever since I started going to church, I was working in children's ministry at church. And children's ministry is wonderful and necessary and great. And we teach a lot of, we teach Bible stories. And that's pretty much what children's ministry is. It's usually different Bible stories with a lesson, very similar to what we do in grown-up church. But once I became, well, actually, let me back up. When I was teaching in public school for a while, and we had a group that would meet at public school, and I don't know what it's like in Canada, but you can't do, like here we can't do that. So I had to get special permission to use the grounds. I couldn't use inside, couldn't use like air condition or electricity or anything like that, but I could use the actual grass outside and meet and have Bible studies in public school.
Yeah, we used to have prayer on the flag is what we used to do. I'm not sure how much they do that still, because I know our school's been cracking down a lot more on Christianity, not religion, but Christianity.
Yeah.
Where you can't, like, Bibles are not supposed to be in there. I was shocked when my son brought home a Gideon Bible this year. He actually brought home a few because his friends didn't want it, so he brought home a few that his friends were just gonna like toss, and he's like, no, don't throw it out, I'll take it.
Yeah, we'll get those to China or someplace that really needs them.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, so teaching in the public school was a lot more of catechism, of starting to just give them the question, like a teacher, like what is your purpose for living? Why are we here? Why did God make you? And most children cannot answer that. I mean, I think a lot of adults don't even have that answer, but the answer is to glorify God, that we are here for his glory. Things like that, just for them. I wanted them to have those tools, those kinds of answers to those questions, to know the gospel backwards and forwards, starting from the garden and ending in heaven, and just knowing the gospel back and forwards. I mean, a lot of people, children included, don't know the whole message of the gospel, couldn't tell you, in a minute, the story of the gospel. And so I just really, every week would talk about the gospel so that they would know it and know it. That's what teachers do. We just review the important things a lot of times,
Yeah, and
so
that goes to the firm foundation that I harp on quite often. Sorry for everybody, but it's firm foundation, and with children in particular, it's good to get that started at that young age. So it's very important what you're doing.
Thank you.
In that, because children are lacking in that, and we are seeing so many people falling away from religion, and children, especially when they leave home, they just fall away from religion. And I think so much that goes to that firm foundation that they're lacking. And that's where you come in with what you're doing, and where we need to follow suit with what we're doing. And as parents, as churches, getting children into these things and making that a priority. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Yes. So yes, and so now that's where I am. I have a group of girls and mothers, and we are working again on those kinds of questions for them to just know the gospel and to know all the questions that catechize us, why we are here, what we are made of, what our purposes are, what God's constructs are for marriage and family, how to pray, how to really to harness our power that the Holy Spirit has in us. And I'm in a beach community, so we meet at the beach and we pray for a lot of people that just might be walking by at the beach. And we can tell, maybe this person needs some prayer just by looking at them, looking at the clothes or the bathing suit that they're wearing or the language they're using, things like that. We can tell just a little bit about them, and just teaching the children to be perceptive of the prayer needs of people, and just guiding them through it. Because I know that they're going to learn the Bible. And my daughter goes to Christian school, and I know she's going to learn it there, and I know she's going to learn it at school, but it's just a lifestyle. Like I've said many times during this interview, that worldview, that biblical worldview, just get in the world and show that everything in the world. The proverb was it 22:6 that says, raise your child up in the things of the Lord, so that when they're old, they know which way to go. The word old is really beard. And I think a lot of people think it means that when you're an old man or an old woman, that you'll know God's word and you'll remember how he wants things to be done. But it really refers to when you get your first beard. It really refers to adolescence, teenage years, young adulthood, that we want them to be so prepared for that young adulthood, for marriage, for those first relationships, and to become, ready to be an adult and to be a mother and a father and have a family. And so that's just, I'm passionate based on the experience that I had growing up and my own, faith journey, my own sin problems that have led me to it. I really pray for all the girls, all the children out there, that they would save themselves for the woman or the man of God's intention for them, and that they would have that blood covenant and have the children and the family the way God intended, without all the pain and the heartbreak.
Yeah, and that is so important. Where can people find you and your books online?
My books are on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, but my website is Cara, Cara -adams.org, and you'll see my blog, all my social media, on book links to the books as well. So I'd love to communicate with any of your listeners that might be interested in a book reading, but also just to, if you're like-minded and you have some advice or you have some connection or anything that we could hook up about and work together on, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to that in the description as well for the on the podcast, as well as on the YouTube channel, so people can find it there. But thank you for coming on here. I've really appreciate it. It's been a great talk, very informative as well. So thank you.
Thanks for having me, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you for listening to Cool Explorations. You've just heard Cara Adams speaking about her children's books that she writes, and about how important it is to teach our children biblical matters at a young age and in a way that they can understand and grasp, so they can have a firm foundation growing up for their faith. Well, I have just been blessed with so many people who are requesting to be on the show, and I'm impressed with how many people want to share their testimonies or what they're doing for the Lord right now. If I haven't got back to you, I promise I will get back to you. I look forward to speaking with each of you and interviewing you, and keep tuning into the show. There's lots of new people that are coming on here, and if you're considering wanting to come on the show, just shoot me an email at tpeters745@gmail.com, and I will get back to you.